Welcome back to Move with Joe. In today's topic, we're going to be discussing common postural issues while sitting that create tension in the low back, tension between the shoulder blades, and in the neck. Couple key foundations. Oftentimes people have a misperception of what good posture is. And I can remember in elementary school being told to sit upright, pull the shoulders back, make the head tall, stick out the chest proud. And these things, although the teachers were trying to do their best, were oftentimes misguided. And what they ended up doing was creating a lot more rigidity in our system. And what good posture is it's actually the absence of this muscular tone. So if we're having to conform ourselves by rigidifying our body and creating tension in our back, in our low back, in our shoulder blades to pull ourselves into an erect position, we're actually creating more harm than good, because what ends up happening is we're creating a pattern of contraction over another postural imbalance. So a better strategy would be to find better skeletal support to reduce the effort and allow you to sit for longer periods of time without creating more muscular tension. So the key to that is really finding better skeletal support. And the first thing we want to do is notice where our sit bones are. When we're sitting, we typically have 4 points of contact. We have our 2 feet and our 2 sit bones. So first, go ahead and take both of your hands, slide them underneath from the side, almost to the point that the fingertips are touching each other. And then just begin to move around. You can do little circles through your torso. You can roll your pelvis forward and back. But I want you to just start to explore the surface of the sit bone. And so the sit bones are not perfectly flat. There's actually a curvature that you're moving across as you're either moving your torso or you're rotating your pelvis back and forth. So keep the hands under there, and for a moment begin to roll the pelvis forward and back. So if you could imagine your pelvis is a bowl, you're tipping the bowl forward so the water spills forward, and you're tipping the bowl back so the water spills back behind you. And you're doing that through your torso muscles, rolling the pelvis back and forth. And notice as you roll back and forth, at what point does your head get tallest to the ceiling or nearest to the ceiling? And when does it get shortest? And as you're making this movement, feel with your hands how your sit bones are rolling back and forth across the surface of the table or across your hands. And if you're like me, as you tuck the tail under and the water spills back, you begin to shorten and round into the C curve. And as you bring the pelvis forward and the bowl spills forward, you begin to create more extension in your spine and you start to get taller. And you may get to a point where if you keep going, you actually start to shorten again. So just notice as you go back and forth where the highest point is on your sit bones. And once you get to that point, go ahead and just slide out your hands. And just notice if this is any different than how you typically sit on your sit bones. For most of us, we sit with our tailbone tucked under, so we end up rounding our butt under, and so we're always behind our sit bones. And when that happens, we naturally have to pull ourselves forward by engaging those low back muscles and creating a lot of tension there. And then the next thing we do is we pull back our shoulders and we pull back our head. So all of this leads to a lot more tension. All right, so after you find the highest point on the sit bones, go ahead and slide out your hands. And the next thing that we want to practice is just finding our breath. So another thing that we typically tend to do is hold a lot of tension in our core to hold in our gut, and that core is connected all the way through the back. So we're actually creating this compression through the whole body. And you'll notice that if you place both hands on your belly, if you take a few breaths into the belly, some of you might have difficulty actually expanding the belly out. So naturally, our bodies are supposed to expand on the inhale through the torso. So the diaphragm that sits up in the rib cage begins to expand down into the abdomen, the abdominal cavity, and the ribs should begin to open up and expand to create that space for air to fill our lungs. So go ahead and take a moment, place both hands on the belly, and purposely try to breathe a larger breath down into the belly. And you can take a nice big inhale through your nostril, just track it down. You could visualize it coming down through the belly. And then you exhale, let the belly sink back in. Inhale, belly expands. Now, go ahead and place one hand into the small of your back. And this time, begin to breathe not only into your belly, but also try and bring some breath into your low back. And if you're holding a lot of tension, if you're contracting and pulling that pelvis forward, you're not going to feel very much breath back there. But if you have this sense of finding that sit bone support and having a little softness in that back, you should be able to feel a little expansion of the back as you breathe in. So take a few moments to breathe in and out, trying to expand three-dimensionally through the torso. Good. So this is a great indicator of whether or not you're holding too much tension in your back or your abdomen. The ability to expand and contract with the inhale and exhale. Let's just recap. In terms of the sit bones, that is your big key thing to find when you come to sit. And I'll just demonstrate as you're sitting, instead of bending your knees and letting your butt tuck under, what we want you to do is drive the hips back so the sit bones, if you had x-ray vision, start coming backwards so that they open up, the space opens up for you to sit on. So I'll just show you from standing, driving the hips back, letting the sit bones drive back till you get right up on top of them. Now, if you really want to find that additional extra support, you can also slide your hands out from behind you and grab a hold of your glutes, the butt tissue, and just pull it back a little bit. And that way you get even more firm support from the bone. So you can imagine the butt is being like this jello mold. And if you're sitting on a jello mold, you kind of have less stability, less support. Whereas if you pull some of that tissue back and you get right up on top of the sit bones, all of a sudden you have this really firm, stable platform to create support for yourself. So by having the sit bones and the feet as our 4 points of contact, now we can kind of just tip the torso back and forth a little bit until we find that point where the majority of the weight is coming straight from the top of the crown down through our sit bones. And that's how we maximize our skeletal support so that our muscles are not having to work so hard. Now, a couple pointers for when you're working at your desk. Ideally, you want your computer screen or ideally monitor to be at eye height. Most of us are working off of laptops, and when we're working off a laptop, our head comes forward as we're looking down at the screen and typing, and that creates tension and rounding where these muscles in the back have to pull us or hold us upright. Now, if we have a monitor, our eyes are at eye level, our head can stay stacked over top of our skeleton, and again, the skeleton is supporting us and not our muscles as much. So a second thing to consider is having a keyboard that's detached that you can have so that your elbows are by your side and your forearms are at about a 90 degree, maybe slightly lower. That way you're not having to elevate your shoulders to be typing up high. You're not having to round your shoulders to be typing out far in front of you. Ideally, we want to think about that skeletal support and maximizing that efficiency. All right, so I hope you enjoyed today's video on finding better support to reduce those painful posture points of the upper back, neck, low back, and it all comes down to finding postural support. There are many other ways to continue to refine this movement, and one of the best ways is to just get into more of a movement practice. And I'll link a couple videos here and here to give you some more movement ideas in terms of finding better skeletal support, better efficiency in your movement so that you can continue to refine your movement and become more comfortable in your day-to-day life. All right, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Please hit the like and subscribe button. Leave a comment. Tell me what has worked for you, what has not worked for you with posture. And if you'd like to see maybe another video on standing posture in terms of working from a standing desk, let me know in the comment section, and we'll see you next time.